democracy on the continent is in danger. The target is not Moldova. Moldova is just a testing ground. If Putin is allowed to win in Ukraine, it's not going to be just Moldova's security in danger. Europe should learn from us, from countries which are on the front line of the fight for democracy.
What do you believe Putin's ultimate ambitions are?
Well, of course, he wants to control the continent. That's very clear to me.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for joining us. One of the reasons why our panel named you World Leader of the Year was because the election, the parliamentary election this year, was, in our view, perhaps the most important in the world. Could you begin by explaining what was at stake in this election?
Well, in the last 14 months, we had 2 important elections and 1 very important referendum where the people of Moldova decided that they want to stay part of the free world despite Russia's threats and despite the interference of Russia. And the parliamentary elections, of course, were extremely important in addition to the referendum, because the majority in the parliament has the power to decide what happens to Moldova next. And because the pro-European forces won the elections, it means that Moldova will continue on its EU path. And for us, the EU accession process is really the survival strategy. It's the only way to survive as a democracy, given the challenges that we're facing today in our region. And that's why it was so important, because it's about democracy, it's about sovereignty. Because if Russia's proxies would have won, it would have meant that Russia would have run the country, and we want Moldovans to decide for Moldova and Moldovans to run their country.
Talking to seasoned European diplomats who've been around the world, they say that in that election they've never seen such a level of interference and attempt to manipulate and subvert the democratic choice in this country. Could you outline a little bit about what took place and how you were able to fend it off?
Moldova is one of the very few countries which has experienced the full range of Russia's hybrid attack methods. And it starts with the illicit financing of political parties and of the election campaign, with attempts to bribe voters, of course the disinformation, the manipulation of information, with attempts to provoke violence. We have seen it several times, financing of protests, the cyber attacks, and then during the day of the elections, they even had these false bomb alerts to prevent the Moldovan diaspora abroad to be able to vote, because different countries would have different policies, but you have to check on these bomb alerts, even though you know that they're false. So it's really a lot. The most difficult part, of course, is to deal with the manipulation of information and disinformation because of the scale of this, and because of the new technologies, the AI and the technologies that are being used, but also the illicit funding. This is quite a challenge. First, at the referendum last year, we discovered that Russia was buying votes in Moldova. So we had to take very tough measures, and we have managed to significantly reduce and hopefully totally eliminate this. But the difficulty, even with regard to the illicit funding of some political parties, comes from the fact that Russia uses cryptocurrency more and more. We have discovered during these elections that Russia had just in one wallet, crypto wallet, 107 million euros, just one wallet. And this becomes really sophisticated to trace the money and to prove in time for the elections that one or another political party is being financed illegally from abroad.
I was wondering what lessons there might be for the rest of Europe. There are some key elections coming up in the next few years. Populist parties, some of which contain pro-Moscow voices, are on the rise. Do you think that what we saw in Moldova, which is often described as a testing ground for Russian hybrid warfare, could be repeated in Europe, that there is a threat to European democracy from Russian interference that we could see scaled up in the rest of Europe?
So in our case, it mattered that we acted beforehand. So you cannot wait until 2-3 weeks before the elections. You have to start early. And we started early because of our previous experience at the referendum on EU integration. Also, exposing Russia's interference helps, because then you have whole of society response to that. So we had the government institutions exposing what Russia was doing, but also the independent media exposing that. So this would be more credible for the people, because sometimes when it's only the government saying that, the propaganda from Kremlin would say, oh, the government cannot deliver to the people, and that's why now they're trying to take the discussion and blame it on Moscow. So we had the whole of government and whole of society response. And it was also very important to have a very coordinated effort. After the lessons we had at the referendum in 2024, we realized that we need everybody to work as a team. The anti-money laundering institution, the anti-corruption institution, the tax inspectorate, because when it's about the illegal financing, of course, the institutions dealing with the attacks on cyber, the cyber security institutions. So it was really a team which worked from January 1st together, and the team managed to tackle these networks of interference before, and to dismantle them before they became too dangerous. But in the case of Moldova, Russia's interference has been brutal, and it was easier to expose it, and it was easier for the people to see the risks. In the case of the EU countries, Russia's interference is not that brutal. It's disinformation mainly and manipulation of information, and that's more difficult to show to the people and for the people to understand that there is somebody behind paying for these troll farms to influence their views. And of course, your institutions are better equipped to deal with the illicit financing when it comes to cryptocurrency, but it can also be a challenge. So it was more difficult for us because it was a lot, but at the same time, it was easy to make people aware of the risks. In your case, in the case of the EU countries, I think it's really a challenge to bring it to the people, for them to see the risks to their democracy.
Do you believe that Russia poses a significant threat in European elections, in Britain in the future? Because,
yes.
Moldova is described as a testing ground for Russian hybrid
yes.
warfare. So could you characterize some of those, what is at stake for European electoral process, for Europe in general?
I strongly believe that the target is not Moldova. Moldova is just a testing ground. The target is Europe, the democratic Europe, the entire continent. And this is what Russia has been doing already. I guess it's less obvious to many people, but the target is Europe, and Europe should learn from us, from countries which are on the front line of the fight for democracy. And I do believe that the Russia's aggressive stance is already obvious, should be obvious to everybody. So democracy on the continent is in danger. Russia does not like it, and Russia wants to change things.
Since the election, we've seen Russian drone incursions into Ukraine. Could you talk a little bit about what the hybrid threat has been, or the Russian threat has been, since the election?
I do believe that Moscow was to some extent shocked because they did spend a lot of money in the Moldovan elections, and they expected different results. And I'm saying that because there was no reaction from Kremlin for the first few days after the elections. We do understand that Russia is not going to give up on us. Russia is probably going to change its tactics. Now it is busy probably with other countries in the region which have elections. But the propaganda is still here, the manipulation. And Russia has been all these years trying to make people not trust the leadership, not trust the state institutions, and especially we see the attacks on the institutions which prove to be more efficient in dealing with Russia's interference, in saying that the West is not, and of course a lot of anti-EU propaganda, that the West is not strong enough, you cannot count on the West, and you should be friends with Russia, because otherwise, who is going to save you when Russia gets to Moldova?
If I could ask you about international matters a little bit now, obviously Ukraine peace talks are underway. Washington is pushing for a deal. What do you think is the potential danger to Moldova and to Moldova's European partners if a deal is seen to reward Russia for its aggression in Ukraine?
Everybody wants for peace to return to our region and to the continent, of course. But we want a just peace, and we want a peace which will be sustainable. We don't want a peace which is going to provoke Russia in 6 months from now to come back. I frankly don't believe that Putin is interested in a peace deal, and I do not believe that he's going to accept it. But of course, we do appreciate all the efforts to bring peace, and let's see what's going to happen.
I mean, do you think that the American approach is at all misguided?
Well, I do believe that President Trump wants peace, and we appreciate this very much. But again, to have peace, you need the aggressor, one way or another, to agree with that. And I just don't believe that there is enough pressure today on Russia to have them agree to stop the war in Ukraine.
You've just had a meeting with President Zelensky. You obviously have a close relationship, and perhaps more than any other leader in Europe, you understand what is at stake, because both Moldova and Ukraine are very much in Moscow's firing line. What's his state of mind, and why is that relationship so important? Perhaps you could characterize the nature of it.
Moldova owns its base to Ukraine. We understand that, and we are trying to help as much as we can. Of course, Moldova has limited resources, but I want to remind you that more than 1 million Ukrainian refugees crossed our borders. This is quite big for a population of 2.4 million. We continue to support Ukraine in the international fora with humanitarian aid. We do have good relations, and we will continue to do everything we can to help Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting for our freedom, and not just for Moldova, because if Putin is allowed to win in Ukraine, it's not going to be just Moldova's security in danger. His objectives go beyond Ukraine, Moldova, and other countries. But also our sovereignty depends on how the war in Ukraine is going to end. And it's not just Moldova's sovereignty. I believe that this is about the sovereignty of all most of the former Soviet Union countries. So it's about security, but it's also about our sovereignty.
What do you believe Putin's ultimate ambitions are?
Of course, he wants to control the continent. That's very clear to me.
We've seen a country like Georgia, which once elected a pro-European government, fall back under Moscow's influence. Moldova is in talks to join the European Union. How urgent is that process, and what are the dangers if Moldova or Moldova's application is delayed?
It is very urgent, again, because we see that Russia does not want us to become part of the EU, and we have seen this during our referendum last year on how much money and how many efforts Russia put into this campaign, on anti-EU campaign, to frighten people, telling them that if you vote for the EU integration, then what is happening today to Ukraine is going to happen tomorrow to Moldova. We do have the political support now. All three institutions are aligned. We have shown progress on EU integration, despite the fact that we had 3 elections in the last year, and we had so many crises to deal with. We are very committed. And again, we do understand that this is about Moldova surviving as a democracy. So if EU is going to allow Russia time, to change things here and to change perceptions, then of course this is going to be very problematic. We do have the political support, we do have the popular support, we have the commitment, and we do believe, we hope that the EU countries understand that and that the process is going to go smoothly.
I mean, I think you've talked about 2030 in the past, but is there a limited time frame? Because you fended off Russian interference in this election, but by the next election, I mean, do you think that Moldova has turned a corner, or there's still dangers in the future?
There are dangers for Moldova, and there are dangers for any other countries in the region and on the continent, as long as Russia continues to stay aggressive, and as long as Russia is not stopped. But we have been showing increase in our resilience. We have seen again our vulnerabilities at the parliamentary elections this year. We are working, we have a plan for the next few years to increase our resilience on all these elements of vulnerability. We have promised to people that we will prepare Moldova for the EU integration by 2030, and we will be working very hard. But we do hope that on the other side, because it doesn't depend just on us, the EU institutions and the EU member states will also take it seriously and will support a meritocratic-based system, as the documents say.
And if that means to get round the Hungarian position, decoupling the accession of Moldova to Ukraine, is that a necessary step that might have to be considered?
Well, I do understand that everybody now is waiting to see whether Hungary is going to change its position after the elections. EU has made some decisions to continue the work at the technical level, because now what stops Ukraine and then Moldova, these are not technical issues, these are political issues, and the EU integration process should be about technical issues if we believe in a merit-based process. So I do believe that we will continue with this informal technical arrangements until next year, and then we'll see what's going to be the EU institutions' decision next year.
One of the requirements of the European Union has been on domestic reforms, and I know that that's an issue regardless of EU ambitions, that Moldova, that has been of importance to you personally. Could you talk us through your judicial reforms? I know that there have been quite a lot of steps taken, for example, in the vetting and pre-vetting of judges. But how is that process going?
It is a very difficult reform. It is the most difficult reform for us. And despite the fact that we have full political support for this reform, which is not easy in our part of the world to provide for full political support. And that was one of the concerns, that if the party in power would have not had the majority, then you get into the situation that you need to negotiate such an important reform. So now we don't need to negotiate such a reform. The only discussions we're having on the reform is with the EU, the Venice Commission, which means we have another 4 years to complete the reform. The vetting is happening. The vetting for the judges is more advanced than the vetting for the prosecutors. Of course, there is the issue that the system is not very efficient now, because part of the judges are busy and prosecutors busy looking at their papers to prove that their incomes are acquired legally. Part of them, those who have integrity issues, they're upset. They are not necessarily, working very hard. But as I said, we are pretty advanced with the vetting of judges, and we've started now with the vetting of the prosecutors. There is the second phase, which means the newcomers, so who are the young judges or prosecutors who are coming into the system, and it's clear that you need several years, if not many years, to train them, because it's training on the job, for them to become really good professionals. At the same time, the crimes, the corruption are getting more sophisticated, because just look at the cryptocurrency. We want them to prevent illicit funding of political parties. But this means that they have to be well trained and understand how the current financial schemes work. So it is a long process, but the first step was to get rid of the corrupt people in the system, and this exercise is happening now.
I'll come to, just to finish off in a moment, to some personal questions about how you find being in office, but just a sort of final substantive question on Transnistria, because I mean, there are obvious challenges in terms of reintegration, but there has been some concern about the government's approach on this, that perhaps a strategy that looks more at the positive side, the carrot side of bringing Transnistria into the fold. You know, there was questions raised, for example, about limitations of the number of places where Transnistrians could vote in this most recent election, at a time when actually more Transnistrians were feeling more sympathetic to your party, because the EU had to come to the rescue of, you know, in terms of intervening in gas, having to subsidize after Russia cut off. So do you think that there could be a different approach, and that more priority needs to be placed on finding a way of reintegrating and making Moldova whole again?
Let's clarify the issue of the participation of people from the Transnistrian region at the elections. When you don't have any of the political parties of Moldova being allowed to go and campaign in the region, when you have no chance for the constitutional institutions to be able to go and check what's happening there. Because if you look historically, the number of people who organically voted in the parliamentary elections or presidential elections, this would not go beyond 20,000 people. So this has been always the figure, the trend. Now, we have seen last year, because of the referendum, and this year at the parliamentary elections, we have seen attempts by Russia to corrupt, to bribe, and we even have the proof, including the press has interviewed people who said that they got money, or some of them would just approach the press asking, so who's going to pay me now, because I just voted, who's going to pay me now? So on the right bank of Nistru, you have the police and other institutions which are able to fight the vote buying scheme. On the left bank of Nistru, because our institutions are not allowed to go there to do anything, Russia can very easily corrupt as many people as they want. So on one hand, this is not true democracy when none of the candidates can go and campaign. I remember that when I was, before I was president, during my second presidential campaign in 2020. So I went to one of the polling stations where people from the Transnistria region would come, and I asked them, who are the candidates? And of course, they didn't recognize me, and they didn't even know my name, and I was one of the front runners. So that's a different question on how do you organize proper elections in a region where you can have any campaign, where the press, the free press, is not allowed to go, and so on. But even like that, I mean, so for the organic voters, they could come and they could vote. For the voters that Russia has been trying to bribe and organize, this is a very complicated issue. But going back to a bigger question about the resolving the conflict. From the day one of Russia's war in Ukraine, our priority has been to keep the situation stable in the Transnistrian region. because if anything would go wrong, this would risk to have Moldova dragged into the war. And we wanted to keep our people safe, both in the Transnistrian region and in the rest of the country. The situation has been changing because the smuggling is not happening anymore. The border with Ukraine is closed. And what comes into the region and what leaves the region is now controlled by Moldovan border control. So, including because of that, there is less money in the Transnistrian region because the smuggling has been going down significantly. Russia is providing less gas. They continue to provide gas, but is providing less gas. And there are all kind of technical issues because they could finance this only through companies which are not in the under international sanctions. And every few months they run into this problem, and then they have to identify a way to supply gas which is not, which doesn't go through such companies sanctioned internationally. The biggest issue for us now, because we are making small steps towards the reintegration of the country, is the presence of the Russian military there. We want to get rid of it. We want to get rid of it peacefully, while Russia doesn't want to withdraw the army. So this is like the biggest impediment to the reintegration. We have a plan. We know how much this is going to cost. We know that this can happen in stages. It's not going to be in one day because you need some time to do the demilitarization, to do the democratization, the de-oligarchization, because they have oligarchs there. So, but the number one issue, which is where we need support, is how do we eliminate the Russian army peacefully.
Mm-hmm. What message do you have to Russian speakers? Because obviously Moldova is divided, and we've seen in these elections, of course, there's been manipulation. But how do you reassure Russian speakers that Moldova joining the EU and so on, that their traditions, their cultures, their anxieties, that it's not going to be the end of the world for them?
I have to say that there are many Russian-speaking people in Moldova who want Moldova to be part of the EU. And over the last 4 years, they've seen that we respect equally people who speak Russian, people who speak the Gagauz language. Actually, we are promoting more the need to study the Gagauz language than the local politicians in the Gagauz autonomy, because people there speak Russian instead of speaking Gagauz language or Romanian. And the Russian-speaking people, they also want to have security. They want to have peace, and they see what's happening in Russia. They want to have opportunity. They want to live in a free country. They know that the EU standards towards minorities are higher than what Moldova can ensure today, because it's also a matter of financial resources. It's about economic opportunities. The businesses know that our interests and their interests are in Europe, because today Moldova's exports to the EU are more than 65%, while the Moldovan exports to Russia are 4%. So we see where the benefits are from Moldova. There is a strong pro-EU majority in the country. There is some 20% of people who are still nostalgic for Russia and Soviet Union. And then there is some 20% who want Moldova to be in EU, but who fear Russia and think maybe we should wait until Russia becomes less aggressive and then move on. But they do not understand that we don't have this luxury. We really need to get part of the EU as soon as possible, because too many things are changing in this world, and the situation of small countries are not going to get better.
Final substantive question is, before I just ask a couple of quick questions at the end, the incumbency is a difficult thing in Europe nowadays, and you've gone through severe economic headwinds as a result of the war on the back of COVID. Given high levels of inflation, I know a lot of these indicators are looking a lot better. But how did you manage to persuade people to keep the faith? So regardless of Russian interference, people were still, despite the hardships that a lot of people in Moldova have gone through, made the decision to stick with you. Why do you think they did that?
Because the alternative was much worse. People did understand that what the Russian opposition offered was not going to bring them more economic benefits, was not going to bring them more security, because this is what one of Russia's narrative has been, that if you vote for people who do not get along with Putin, then Russia is going to attack you. And we had to go back and explain it to people that, on the contrary, Russia wants to control Moldova to create even more problems to Ukraine, because Moldova has a very long border with Ukraine. It's 1,200 kilometers. You can imagine how problematic this would have been for Ukraine if Russia would have got control of a power in Moldova. And we explained it to people that, on the contrary, because we are part of the free world, Moldova is safe. When Moldova is used against Ukraine, then the security of the Moldovans is going to be put in danger. And then, yes, we have had, in the first year of the war, we had an inflation rate of 35%. That was really bad. The prices for energy increased significantly. And actually, this is another thing where we did really big progress in this country. Because 4 years ago, we were 100% dependent on Russian gas. Today, we don't buy any Russian gas. And in January, we're going to have the first high-voltage electricity connection line functioning. And we have done things that should have been done in 30 years. We've done them in 4 years with respect to energy security and independence. So but in the meantime, EU helped us, and our partners helped us, and Great Britain helped us dealing with Russia's interference on cybersecurity, on fighting the manipulation, and so on. So yes, it's been difficult, but we did get help from EU, from the democratic countries, not from Russia. Russia, on the contrary, has been creating all these problems. So I think we've been pretty successful with respect to fighting Russia's narratives. Some of them, for instance, during the referendum, one of Russia's narratives, unfortunately, went through. Russia just told people that if you become a EU member state, EU is going to confiscate your land. And we thought people would not believe that, because it was the Soviet Union which confiscated the land of our grandparents. But somehow people believe this. And when you go and talk to people who voted against at the referendum, you ask them why, and they tell you because, EU was going to come and take our land. So, but for most, after the experience at the referendum, we've learned how to deal with these propaganda topics. And the EU integration, the promise of the EU integration mattered a lot, and the fact that we have shown results. Of course, the EU latest evaluation progress report came after the elections, but still EU has been supportive and has been acknowledging the fact that the government is making reforms so that the EU integration is a reality.
So maybe you could talk to me a little bit about why you joined politics, because you had a successful career at the World Bank. What was it that drove you into a very different line of work?
At that time, I was not thinking that I'm getting into politics. I was offered the job of the Minister of Education. I didn't take it immediately. I thought for a couple of weeks, but then I knew that education is extremely important. And since there was no one else who wanted to take the responsibility, I decided that it's meaningful and it's professionally interesting. So this is how I started with a team in the Ministry of Education. But while we were fighting corruption and cheating in education, very bad things were happening in the rest of the sectors. And this is when the banking sector fraud happened and so on. So we realized that you can't fight corruption and you can't tell kids you should not cheat while they see what some of the leaders of the country and some of the leaders of the political parties are doing in this country. So we just protests had a choice, either to leave the country, because I didn't want to stay in a country where the most important political parties were led by corrupt people. So there was no chance that something would have changed, because it was not just one political party which was led by a corrupt person, but it was all of them. Or you try to create a political party. So we decided, let's try and see. So the party started from the team at the Ministry of Education. And then there were many other things happening, and this is how we got here.
And what do you find the most difficult aspects of being a president?
It's been very difficult. I mean, when I thought it was difficult to get to power, then when you get to power, you understand how many challenges are, even though I had the experience as a minister and I knew that the public sector has lots of problems. When I won the presidential elections in 2020 and then the party won the parliamentary elections in 2021, I told myself, now we need a bit of luck, not to have some major external challenges, so that we could focus on our internal reforms. And just a couple of months later, the war has started. So it's not how you see it, but this is the time we are in the office. We're grateful for people's support and for people's trust, and we will do everything. First, to keep them safe. Second, to make the state more resilient. And third, to do as much as we can to bring Moldova closer to the EU, because we do need to be part of the EU family. Again, given everything that's happening today to the world. Moldova is a small country. Its democracy is still fragile. So it's not easy. On a more personal note, of course, you get very little time to spend with your family. And then you are under exposure, like 24, which is also not easy. Sometimes you just want to walk and nobody to take a picture of you.
We've seen some of the most astonishing, an astonishing smear campaign from through disinformation against you. We've seen astonishing stories about Elton John suggesting that you had bought his sperm. You know, at a human level, it's difficult for any human being to deal with those kind of personal attacks. How do you deal with them?
I can't say that I've got used to that, but this doesn't surprise me. I have to remind you that when I ran for the presidency for the first time in 2016, I had the Moldovan church, or at least some part of the Moldovan church, going out to the press and saying, "Don't vote for a woman. It's a sin to vote for a woman who's not married, who doesn't have children." And you know, and there was a lot of other bad things. So you can't, you know, you don't have solutions for that. You might have laws on you know, on hate speech and so on, but it doesn't work. The hate speech is there, and because of the technologies of the social platforms, there is more and more of it. You just need to know that it is going to be there, that some people don't want you to do what you're doing. But if you believe that what you're doing is right, that it's meaningful, that you're helping most of the people or some people, you just don't look at that.
And just finally, I mean, you talked two very quick final questions. First of all, I read somewhere that you don't enjoy giving speeches. I don't know if that's true, whether you have a view on that. And then
I don't enjoy being in front of the cameras.
You don't?
I don't.
This is torture.
It's been really tough for me to go through this. And of course, I started as a minister of education. And when I accepted the job, I had no idea that this is not just about writing strategies and a new law for education and doing analysis on how to improve things, that communicating to the public was a big part of the job. But yes, I don't like to be in front of the cameras.
I'm sorry we've inflicted it on you today. But you're still able to, I gather you enjoy walking your dog and things like that. Are you still, are there
I have two
moments?
dogs now.
2 dogs?
Yes, and I do walk them once in 2 weeks, so that's not, I mean, they have a big yard where they play, but yes, I do like to do a bit of hiking or walking in the woods, and I have 3 more years, and things will change for me.
Grounded. Maia Sandu, the Telegraph's world leader of 2025. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you.